Assalamualaikum everyone. I'd like to share with you this training seminar given by the well-known Dr. To Suihin, the founder of Peace Education in the Philippines. He started peace, especially in Notre Dame University, then to the other universities. So last May 2024, he was here in our university sharing with us, especially in our society, the Philippine Society for Peace and Development, here in Cotabato City, then in coordination also the graduate school in our institution, Cotabato State University. So peace education for healing of a fractured world, challenges and the science of time by Dr. To Suihin. So peace is a dimensional and complex. A culture of peace is holistic. Then peace is no longer just an absence of war or physical violence. Sino nagsabi dito? Alam natin? Not just absence of war. So alam natin, peace is holistic. Alam din natin yan. And multidimensional and complex. So if you look at these petals, the 6 issues of the culture of peace, we call this also the 6th petal. Dismantling the culture of war, living with justice and compassion, promoting human rights and responsibilities, building intercultural respect, reconciliation, and solidarity, living in harmony with the earth, cultivating inner peace. So these are the 6 issues or elements of the culture of peace. So we have also here, as you have see, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by the UN. So the target is 2030 na sana maabot itong lahat na goals na ito, sustainable development, no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, renewable energy, good jobs and economic growth, innovation, infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace and justice, partnership for the goals. So these are the 17 development goals in which ang peace nandoon. So the Sustainable Development Goal and Peace Education. That's Sustainable Goal number 4. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong opportunities for all. So the target of this is by 2030. Sana itong goal number 4, kung hindi man perfect, at least matugunan na. Ensure all the learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture and of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and the culture's contribution to sustainable development. So that will be the target of this goal number 4 on quality education. Especially na itong sa red kasulat, education for sustainable development, human rights and equality, culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship and cultural diversity. Then the indispensable role of education in building the culture of peace, emergence of diverse field of transformative education. So may naka-enumerate dito, historical roots and wisdom of diverse culture and civilization, So yun yung dapat tingnan natin, especially in the context in the Philippines, especially in Mindanao. Education for international understanding, peace education or education for the culture of peace, disarmament education, human rights education, citizenship education, civic education, development education or education for local, global justice, education, values education, moral education, intercultural or multicultural education, global education, indigenous education, education for gender equality, education for sustainable development in the futures, then the global citizenship education. So ito na yun, talagang may malaking role in education in building the culture of peace. Then the values cultivated by the global citizen are transformed into action for a building a peaceful world or a culture of peace. So yun yun sigurong dapat nating tandaan. Transform into action for building a peaceful world or culture of peace. That's if you want to be a global citizen. So a global citizen must go beyond national citizenship or civic education, avoid pitfalls of ultranationalism, passive obedient citizens, acknowledge increasing interdependence and interconnectedness of nations like political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental, then belong to the global community and common humanity. That's a characteristic of global citizen. Then seek global solutions to problems, especially on the issue of the climate change, the migration, the WMDs. Then think and act globally and locally at the same time. That's why tinatawag itong local. Then simultaneously an active and effective global and local national citizen. Sabi na natin that local citizens. Then shift from passive citizenship to active citizenship. Then participate actively and fully in all dimensions of societal life. That's more on the characteristics of a global citizens. Then the goals of peace education or education towards the culture of peace is one, to develop citizens who have the values, attitudes, knowledge, capacities, and skills to actively and responsibly participate in all dimensions of societal development of local, national, global levels. Then second goal is promote a critical consciousness and understanding by citizens of the root causes of multiple conflicts in local, national, global levels of life, including the interconnection of global relationships and structures with local and national realities. Then the third goal of this peace education is empower such active citizens to engage in personal and social action to build a peaceful, just, compassionate, loving, and respectful and sustainable world. So those are the three goals of peace education or education towards a culture of peace. So the pedagogical dimensions of global citizenship education is not only oriented to educating learners to understand the content, especially in the cognitive level. Then this is also the processes of education or the pedagogy needs to be also consistent with the visions and goals of the global citizenship education and other fields of transformative education. The limitations of prevailing dominant banking, according to Paulo Freire, the hierarchical and over-competitive model of education. So these are the four pedagogical principles of global citizenship education. So what are these? Holism, critical empowerment, the values information, then dialogue. Remember these four pedagogical principles of global citizenship education. Once again, dialogue, holism, critical empowerment, values formation. Then a petal of the culture of peace is the dismantling a culture of war. There's a need to prevent and resolve armed conflicts and wars. Example, here in our land, in Mindanao, in the Barm, medyo okay na tayo ngayon. Then, abolition of militarization like nuclear, conventional, armed expenditures, and arms trade. So, kailangan yon. Hindi lang pera-pera. Then, overcome violence in schools, workplaces, and homes. Conflict resolution and transformation. Kailangan din yon. Then, recognize interconnections between preventing violent extremisms and the global citizenship education toward a culture of peace. So if you notice, there are 4 other sustainable development goals related to the dismantling of culture of war, like peace, justice, and strong institutions, reduce inequalities, gender equality, life on the water. Kasi ito nasisira na mamatay din yan, especially the life on the water, which is related to the dismantling of the culture of war. Then, dismantling the culture of war and the conflict resolutions. To this world, scared by multiple crises, alam natin yon. The culture of war penetrated and growing, especially the war in Ukraine and Russia, in visions that was last February 2022. Then the ongoing, until today, the ongoing Israel-Gaza war started 2023, 2024. And I think you know what happened to 2023 and 2024. Nagandihan sila. Then what are the root causes of war and our conflict? So yun yung dapat pagtuunan. Kasi pag matugunan yan, maiwasan na ito and we will be able to resolve problems, to dismantle the culture of war. Another is the Ukraine war. Russia violates the UN Charter, the UN right to self-defense. Then the new Cold War danger of the World War III. So very dangerous yan. Then the NATO de facto involvement, the huge military aid to Ukraine. So ayun na yung problema. The impact of the rest of the world like food crisis, global hunger increase, then sanctions to Russia oil and gas export for that's an energy crisis. Then why? The root causes of Ukraine war. Siguro alam na ito ng iba. Then the Western view, Putin seeks to recreate the Soviet Empire, hence the threat to democratic Europe. Then another alternative view, the NATO expanded despite end of the Cold War and the Western promises not to expand. So na yon ang hinungdan or the cause, the root cause. Then the US seeks to bring Ukraine and Crimea into NATO. Then Russia seeks expansion as existential threat. Then civil war in Ukraine as Russian-oriented provinces demand autonomy. So yon ang root cause of the Ukraine war. So in addition, the call on Ukraine to remain neutral was rejected by the West or the NATO. Then the NATO military training and aid to Ukraine over last decade. Then early negotiations to end war mediated by Turkey and almost succeeded but aborted by the USA and NATO leaders. So yon problema. Then Ukraine given weapons and aid to continue war. Then there was a massive numbers of Ukrainian Russian soldiers killed or injured and millions of Ukrainian refugees. Then the question, can Ukraine win war? Can this lead to Russian use of nuclear weapons, triggering the World War III? Then many United Nations resolution to end war vetoed by the US and the allies. The non-participating countries need to urge all parties to negotiate for peace and end war. Then the root cause of the Israel-Gaza war. On October 7, 2023, the Hamas and the other Palestinian resistance groups attacked Israel, killing 300 soldiers and over 1,000 civilians. 250 Israeli hostages taken to Gaza. Then Israel and United States of America, or the Western allies, condemned October 7 Hamas-led attack for starting war. And I think during that time, if you still remember, may festivity ang Israel, binumba sila, then gumanti sila. Then Israel responded with a massive attack on Gaza, heavy bombardments, and later ground attack, genocidal outcome. So yun yung nangyari. Kaya nga, dito sa Pilipinas, apektado tayo, mga kapatid natin, pulbusin ang Israel. Pero dapat hindi ka naon if you are a peace advocate. Mga tao din sila. Kasi nga, tingnan yung root cause, bakit nagkaganon sila. Kung ang dati pang presidente na si Duterte, wag na kayong makialam. Kasi if you notice, nagrarally din tayo sa farm against the Israel. So yun ang problema. Kaya parang kampihan, pero wala tayong maidudulot dyan. Then Israel urges Hamas must be eliminated and destroyed and claim civilians not targeted. So yan, kaya nga gumanti din ang Israel. Then critical peace education perspective, understanding the current Gaza war cannot begin with October 7 Hamas attack. Then need to understand the 75 years of Israel apartheid, Hitler's colonization imposed by the Zionist movement and the Western support, Gaza under Israel siege since 2017. Accusation of Hamas, war crimes, should also investigate the war crimes of Israel over 75 years. Then the U.S. and the Western powers support Israel's response to October 7 attack, continuing financial military aid. Then many United Nations resolution calling to ceasefire vetoed by the United States. Then Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu and the right-wing government reject the permanent ceasefire, seeks to eliminate Hamas and reject the second state solutions. Then will U.S. and other Western allies pressure Israel to agree the permanent ceasefires and release Israel's hostages? So that's a question. Can a peace process to attain the second state solution be attained? Or a first state solution? Can peace talks succeed? Kaya nga until today, wala pa rin. Tuloy-tuloy pa din yung giyera. Kasi may mga nag-intervene din. That's a problem. Then Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the latest findings that countries are spending 2.2% of the world's gross domestic products on armaments. So, dero mo yan. Then the world military spending grew for the 18th consecutive year in 2022 to an all-time high of $2,240 billion US dollars. The United States, China, and Russia accounted for 56% of the total. Then global military spending grew by 19% over 2013 to 2022, rising every year since 2015. So yon ang problema. Then there's this formal strategy and education. There's a need for peace process and talks and negotiation. Like for example, here in the BARM, because of that negotiation, the peace process, medyo tahimik na tayo ngayon. The non-violent communication model, kailangan talaga yon. Then the conflict resolution method, kailangan yon. The transformation, conflict resolution of John Paul Lederach, alam na din ninyo yon. According to John Paul Lederach, in order to transform conflict, we have to look at the different lenses. Then campaign against arms trade, then UN treaty to abolish nuclear weapons. Teachers, parents, and students advocating conflict resolution, violence prevention, anti-bullying, and peer mediation in schools. So yun yung dapat kailangan strategy, disarmament strategy, and education. Then another issue on promoting human rights and responsibility, one of the petals. Despite the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights in 1948, I think that's December 10, followed by the numerous covenants and convention, treaties, and declaration on human rights, continuing pervasive violations of human rights on national, international, regional, and global levels. So, the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights that was December 10, 1940, human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, whatever is the nationality, the place of residence, the sex, the national and ethnic origin, color, religion, and language. That's for all your human rights. That's why it's a Universal Declaration of the Human Rights from the UN. Then we have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. An example of this, life, liberty and security persons, gender identity, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, freedom of slavery and servitude, freedom from torture, equal protection of the law, a fair trial and public hearing, freedom from arbitrary arrests, and political participation. Then these various covenants and treaties and declarations and protocols, agreements from 1948 to the present. Another is example on the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, social security, work and free choice, equal pay for equal work, form and join trade unions, migrant workers, elderly, PWDs, women, the IPs, non-racism, education, faith, and religion, the rights of the child. And I think in our Constitution, nakasulat din yan, Article 13 of the Bill of Rights. So the human rights issues and theme, fulfilling all human rights for all peoples, implementation of international human rights, instruments and domestic laws, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, abolish human rights violations, then responsibility of the states, institutions, organizations, and individuals to protect human rights. Then avoid over legalistic dimensions of human rights education. Then deal with root causes, not just symptoms of human rights violation. Impact of paradigms of development of human rights, especially the transnational corporations, militarism, the impact on human rights, then cultural identity and cultural survival as human rights, then the rights are accompanied with responsibilities. Then reject the cultural relativism and promote universal standards. Implement the rule of law. Rights of marginalized groups and sectors like the poor, the workers, the farmers, women, children, persons with disabilities, the IPs, discriminated gender identities, then protect human rights defenders, then human rights education, then build a culture of human rights in communities and institutions. Then another problem in the West Philippine Sea, defending human rights of the Filipino people. Take note of this at alam na alam natin ito. China has claimed control of numerous reefs of the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea, building militarized islands. Other countries have also asserted control of other islands. Tensions between China and the Philippines increase in the part due to the shift of the Philippine foreign policy away from China to the United States, and now the Philippine government's more assertive defense of the Philippine sovereignty rights based on the 2016 International Arbitral ruling in favor of the Philippines against China in the 9-Line claim. So, panahon ito ni Tatay Digong, hinayaan ng China. So, anong nangyari ngayon? May base militar na sila. And that's the problem. In fairness naman kay dating Presidente Aquino, na nanalo tayo sa International Tribunal na atin yung karagatan than China's 9-Line claim. Then China responded with bullying and hostile and dangerous action against the Philippine resupply mission of the soldiers on boards. and grounded the BRP Sierra Madre ships within the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone and against the livelihood of Filipino fisher folk. Alam natin yon. Kaya nga binubuli talaga tayo whether we like it or not. And because of marami mang DDS dito, because of Duterte. Kaya kinakanlong sila. Kaya gusto man kasi ng Duterte that Philippines will become a province of China. So, yon ang tingnan ninyo. Then the West Philippine Sea conflict impacts on the human rights of the Filipino peoples. The rights of self-determination, sovereignty over their territory are recognized under the international law. The right to food and livelihood of Filipino fisher folk who have been prevented by Chinese Coast Guard and other militia ship from fishing the Philippine yung area natin sa zone natin. Then the right of the Philippine government to conduct resupply missions of the Sierra Madres and the patrols of its Coast Guard vessels and other government vessels safely without dangerous obstructions and other actions by unofficial Chinese ships. In addition, the building by China of the artificial military islands in the regions has caused environmental destruction with negative impact on the rights of the Filipinos to sustainable fisheries. More assertive policies and actions of the current Philippine government to defend the sovereignty rights over the West Philippine Sea seeks increased international political support. So yun yung ginagawa ng ating present administration ni Marcos. Okay na sana yun kay Pinoy. Pinalaki ang ulo ng China ng tatay ninyo. Then what happened now? At least may willpower naman ngayon si President Bongbong na kunin uli kasi atin yun, hindi yun sa kanila. Then the resolutions of West Philippine Sea conflict, increase assertiveness of the Philippines and artificial ruling, gather international support, continuing diplomatic processes with China, increase the Philippine control of disputed islands and reefs, expand Philippine Coast Guard's capacity, prevent further deterioration of BS Sierra Madre, joint patrols of the West Philippine Sea by the Philippine navies or armed forces, the Philippine navies, and the supportive allies like Japan, United States, Australia, Canada. But will this extend to resupply and repair missions? So that's another question. Then avoid potential involvement US-China conflict over Taiwan and other disputes. So Taiwan and China, may problema man din yan. Then economic assertiveness to control the West Philippine Sea resources like Indonesia as well as Vietnam. Explore and develop energy resources, then develop equitable national fisheries industries. So that's a resolution in the West Philippine Sea. Then education for global local justice. Realities and symptoms of the world hunger and poverty. Billions suffers from hunger, have no safely managed sanitation and water services, basic healthcare and housing. So yun yung katotohanan na masakit. According to Oxfam, one of the NGO, the richest 1% bag 82% of the wealth created. The poorest half of the humanity, 3.7 billion, got almost nothing. Kaya nga, kaluoy ang pobre. Then the rich minority of nations and citizens, inequalities between and within nations. Then on the issue the COVID-19 global pandemic accentuate inequalities and injustices. Alam din natin ninyo yun. Then the pandemic shows local, national, global inequalities. This appropriately affects the marginalized communities and equal access to vaccines. At alam yun nating lahat. Another issue is living with justice and compassion, building global, local justice, overcome structural violence. So yun yung kailangan. Eliminating rural and urban poverty, meeting basic needs, the basic needs of all peoples, especially the poor. Then abolish social and economic injustices in the local, national, international, global. Then transform trade, aid, and globalization. Then reducing power of globalization, like in the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, and the rest. So there 2, 4, 6, 7. So there are 7 sustainable goals under this living with justice and compassion. No poverty, no hunger, good health, clean water and sanitation, good jobs and economic growth, gender reduce inequalities, gender equality, and the sustainable consumption. So peace education in the global citizenship education and other fields of transformative education, ito yung kailangan. Learners need to understand the different paradigms of development. So ito yung dapat kailangan. Kaya nga tayo mga teachers, what are these paradigms of development? So the modernization, the liberal, neo-liberal. So ito yung dati sa globalization, the paradigm of development. From globalization, from the global or corporate-led development. There is a growth. The developing countries lack capital and expertise structure values, the integration of globalized economic privatization, liberalization, then the role model industrialized developed countries. The developed countries helpful through trade, aid, and investment. So, and here you have the World Trade Organization, transnational organization, the International Fund, investments. So, yon ang dapat tingnan din sa modernization yan. So, alternative paradigm emerge to challenge the dominant paradigms. First is, nasabi, root causes of global poverty and hunger should be embedded in the structural violence, then unequal and economic and social structures relationship and system means global resources not distributed fairly. Sufficient planetary resources for basic needs of all human beings if production and distribution fail. People, especially the vulnerable sectors, die needlessly even in the absence of wars and conflict, armed conflict. And why? Kasi pobre man sila. Kahit na walang pera, kasi pobre, magkalabo-labo, magka-problema talaga. So, unequal and unjust global economic system, the role of powerful institution, organization, the transnational corporation. Ka-problema kasi ang mga maliit na corporation, mawawala yan. Then the international financial institution, the World Bank, the International Monetary Bank, and the World Trade Organization. Agribusiness undermines food sovereignty, human rights violations of workers, men and women, children, the IPs. Then the IPs reject the development aggression. So ito yung isa sa alternative na dapat isusulong. Itong the peace paradigm of development. Peace, this is an acronym. P, participatory. E, equitable. A, appropriate. Critical empowerment. Ang C, ecological sustainability. What does it mean? Kung may mga project, may mga program na dapat ibigay doon sa mga tao, sa communities, dapat itong peace paradigm of development dapat i-apply. Okay. Participatory, dapat nandoon yung mga tao. Equitable, all the goods, the services, the projects should be fairly given to the constituents of the community. Yung project ba yun? Yung program ay appropriate sa mga tao? Yun yung tingnan. Then, are they empowered? Yung mga tao. Alam ba nila? Then, ecological sustainability. Ibig sabihin dito, kung may project, may program, dapat wag din sirain ang kalikasan. Kasi ito yung malaking tulong, alternative paradigm of development, itong the peace paradigm. So once again This was introduced by To Suhin itong PEACE, the acronym. Participatory, Equitable, Appropriateness, or Appropriate, Critical Empowerment, and Ecological Sustainability. Then the national policies, development policies need to be people-centered and promote social economic justice. There's a need also to regulate investment and the transnational corporations to ensure activities do not violate rights of citizens, ensure equitable sharing of profits, and avoid environmental destruction. Tandaan yung mga transnational corporation. Then grassroots, urban, and rural poor communities and the NGOs and the CSOs promoting equitable and sustainable development. So that's why there is a name for us, a fair trade campaigns about this issue. Then another petals is the building intercultural respect and reconciliation solidarity. There's a need to foster intercultural understanding and respect. Especially dito sa atin, iba-iba ating kultura. Then overcome discrimination, stereotyping, and racism. Then solidarity with the IP's survival. Kasi here in our land, maganda itong barn. Kasi it's not exclusive, but it is inclusive. Kasali na yung IP's, the Christians as well as the Moro. Then religion and faith, conflicts and peace building, kailangan yun. Then promoting interfaith dialogue. Kaya nga, mga peace major, mayroon tayong subject na interfaith dialogue. Kasi kailangan yun. Then many curricula tended to emphasize the 4Ds or festivals approach of multiculturalism and intercultural understanding, knowing others' visible cultural dimensions of life and participating in them with respect, interest, and solidarity contributes to cultural respect and learning to live together. Then recognize conflict and find ways to resolve them peacefully, discover common and shared values and principles as a community, as a person. Then learning from the wisdom of all cultures and civilizations, power within the culture, who speaks for or represents for, dapat pakinggan din yon. Then the peace education must also uphold the rights of the IPs. Take note. The long history of colonization, exploitation, and repression, forced conversion to colonizers' religion and culture, ancestral land, and invaded and stolen. So yon ang nangyari. Kaya nga kawawa ang mga IPs ngayon. Then modern globalization from above era, development aggression. However, IPs often viewed as culturally backward, primitive, and obstacles to economic growth and modernization progress. Kaya nga yun yung titingnan natin, especially sa ating mga kapatid. Kasi yun yung akala natin, primitive, backward, wala silang alam, at obstacle sila sa economic development. Then the indigenous knowledge and spiritually depreciated and suppressed, nawawala na. Bakit? Kasi nadadala sila sa majority. The need to acknowledge indigenous sustainability principles and practice in a web of life. International Declaration of the Indigenous People Rights, it was adopted in September 13, 2007. So yun yung dapat pag-aralan muli yung IP's international rights. Then education respects rights of IPs in culturally and socially relevant education. Then in the vision of this, the promotion of Declaration of the role of religion in promoting the culture of peace. In human history, religious traditions and ethical ideas have frequently been used to justify wars and injustices. But the real message behind religious and ethical beliefs is unerring directed at peace and fraternity. So yun yung dapat pinakapunto sa religion. Then declaration expresses solidarity with all non-violent peacemakers and pledges to favor peace by countering the tendencies of individuals and communities to assume and to teach that they are inherently superior to others. So there's a need to overcome religious or faith exclusivism or extremism. Marami yan sa atin, no? Mga exclusivists, ang extremists. Then discrimination and vilification against other faiths, religion, religious motivated violence, gender inequality within religious doctrines and institution. And the vision of dialogue or interfaith dialogue, tingnan ninyo ito. Dialogue to understand each other's based on respect and goodwill. Then acknowledges differences in the beliefs and practices. Discover common or shared values and principles. So you have to look at the commonality among religion. Cooperate in solidarity to build peaceful world and a culture of peace. Then steady growth of interfaith, interreligious dialogue, peace at the core of all religions or faith, but interpretations can have catalyst violence, manipulated by leaders and groups. Kaya nga, may mga extremists din. Then the global interfaith dialogue movement includes the Parliament of the World's Religion, the Religions for Peace, and the United Religions Initiative. So nangyayari na ito based on our lecture in the interfaith dialogue. Then regional, national, and local interfaith dialogue movement. The Bishop Ulama, the Silsila Dialogue Movement. I was once of the member and I started also in the Silsila para maraming matutunan about this interfaith dialogue. Then there is also an essential to promote also the interfaith dialogue. Interfaith dialogue is dialogue of faith within the religion. Halimbawa, kami mga Kristiyano, nag-away-away, dapat mag-dialogue kami. Kayong mga Muslim, the Shia, the Sunni, and 73 or 72 sects, dapat pag-usap-usap within. Okay, that's intra-faith dialogue. It speaks out against religiously motivated and violent extremism within across the other faith. Then another issue naman on the culture and the human rights. The peace education needs to help engage and help to resolve tensions between cultures of human rights. The key areas for resolution and transformation of this culture and human rights is the gender equality and justice, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital rights, reproductive rights, the use of contraception, abortion, is it acceptable? Then conversion and apostasy, that also includes in the culture and human rights. Look at this ecological crisis nowadays in our world. The pollution of air, land, and water, industrial waste, alam natin yun, the nuclear waste, militarization, deforestation, the loss of biodiversity, garbage disposal, erosion, floods and drought, ozone destruction, the global warming, the climate change. So that's the problem now in our land, especially in the ecology, in our environment, ang ating mother nature, malaking problema. So these are the consequences of the climate change. Increase the carbon emission, the rise in temperature, rising sea levels, extreme weather, floods and droughts, the shrinking glaciers, thawing permafrost, irreversibly reduced biodiversity, more than million species at risk future extinction, nawawala na sila, the risk of human health, the increased heat-related deaths in some regions, increasing spread of the pests and pathogens. So yon ang problema, consequences ng climate change. Then another issue on the living sustainably in harmony with the earth, or the environmental care, prevent environmental destruction but cannot address by symptoms. The crisis of climate change, what are the root causes? Tayo yon, mga tao, ang hinungdan, ana. Then the sustainable development paradigms, then the dominant paradigms in addressing environmental destruction and climate crisis, major strategies dapat gawin, technological innovation, cleaner production, increase efficient energy use, using more renewable energies, green growth, Then the Culture of Peace Summits. So yun yung dapat gawin. So in the curriculum, dapat turuan ng mga estudyante, especially dito sa Pilipinas, the culture of peace. This school is a zone for peace, pero walang mga ideya ang mga teacher, even the students. That's why there's a need to educate them, especially in this aspect on peace education. Then the next issue on the culture of peace, cultivating inner peace or personal peace. May mga symptoms daw na nawawala yung inner peace because of the rise in anxieties, depressions and suicide, despair and hopelessness, the loss of meaning, addiction. Kaya nga yung inner peace nawawala because of these symptoms. Then to educate, education for cultivating inner peace, kung nawawalan man ang yung meaning or alienation, nagka-problema. Then nagka-problema yung the lack of spirituality, more consumerism, more happiness, dahil root causes of addiction. So yun ang mga hamon sa inner peace, the consequences. Down. The example of songs of composition na alam niyo itong kanta, Moving in Our Hearts, pwede niyo i-download ito, check niyo sa YouTube. To the tune of Blowing in the Winds, lyrics by Peace Education, students and educators in various counties. How many years must the poor farmers toil before they can call the land their own? How many seas must the fisher folk sail before they can feed their families? And how many streets must the children walk before they can laugh and be whole? The answer, my friends, is moving in our hearts. The answer is moving in our hearts. How many lives must be lost in the wars before we can all live in peace? How many peoples must suffer from hate before we can share the world as one? And why must women be lesser than men before we can walk hand in hand? The answer, my friends, is moving in our hearts. The answer is moving in our hearts. Anyway, pwede ma-download yung Moving in Our Hearts para masundan. But the lyrics is composed by peace education students and educators in the various countries. So ito yung karagdagan din. And with that, God bless everyone and thank you. I hope may natutunan din tayo. And this lecture is given by Dr. To Suhin and his wife, Dr. Virginia Cawagas. God bless everyone. Dalaygon ang Diyos. This is your friend, Brother JoArs Alferez.